Have you ever wondered why some argue that governments should stay out of the economy, while others believe they're essential to fix its problems? At the heart of this debate is a towering intellectual figure from the 20th century, Friedrich Hayek. His ideas didn't just stay in dusty academic books. They reshaped the modern world, influencing leaders like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. But who was this man, and why do his theories on freedom, markets, and the limits of human knowledge still spark such intense discussion today? Join us as we unravel the story of Friedrich Hayek, a Nobel laureate whose warnings about central planning and defense of individual liberty echo louder than ever in our complex world. Let's travel back to 1927. A young Hayek, alongside his mentor Ludwig von Mises, co-founds the Austrian Institute for Business Cycle Research. It's here that he sharpens a revolutionary idea: the Austrian theory of the trade cycle. Imagine the economy as a complex orchestra. Hayek argued that when central banks artificially lower interest rates, it's like a conductor giving the wrong tempo to the musicians. This sends distorted signals, leading businesses to invest in projects that are sustainable in the long run, what he called malinvestment. This eventually leads not to prosperity, but to a painful economic bust or recession. This put him on a direct collision course with the most famous economist of the day, John Maynard Keynes. While Keynes focused on boosting overall spending to fight downturns, Hayek warned that this was just a temporary fix. He believed the real problem was in the structure of the economy, the misallocated investments. Their debate was more than just technical. It was a clash of philosophies. Keynes trusted expert-led governments to steer the ship. Hayek, on the other hand, was deeply skeptical. He argued that the knowledge needed to run an economy is scattered among millions of individuals. No central planner, no matter how brilliant, could possibly gather and process all this information. This idea, known as the knowledge problem, became the cornerstone of his life's work. He famously argued in the socialist calculation debate that even a well-meaning socialist planner could unreplicate the miracle of the price system, which organically communicates information about scarcity and demand across society. Critics, of course, said he was too abstract, ignoring the real human suffering of unemployment. But Hayek's insistence on the limits of knowledge would prove incredibly prescient. Hayek wasn't just an economist. He was a profound thinker whose ideas spanned philosophy, politics, and even psychology. His core concept was spontaneous order, the idea that complex, functional systems, like languages or markets, can emerge and evolve from individual human actions without any central design. Think about it. No single person invented the English language. Yet, we can all use it to communicate. Hayek saw the market economy in the same way. This idea first took shape in early works like monetary theory and the trade cycle. But his most famous work, written during the dark days of World War II, was The Road to Serfdom, published in 1944. It was a passionate and urgent warning. Hayek argued that any society that tries to centrally plan its economy, even with the best intentions, is setting itself on a path that inevitably leads to the loss of personal and political freedom, ultimately ending in authoritarianism. He wasn't saying that socialists were evil. He was saying the asterisk logic, asterisk of central planning requires concentrating more and more power in the hands of the state, eroding liberty step by step. After the war, he continued to build on these ideas. His 1945 essay, The Use of Knowledge in Society, is one of the most important economic articles ever written. It brilliantly explains how market prices act as a vast communication network, transmitting crucial information that allows millions of people to coordinate their actions without even knowing each other. Later, in massive works, like The Constitution of Liberty and Law, Legislation and Liberty, he explored the kind of legal and political rules that are necessary to protect a free society. His final book, The Fatal Conceit, was a last powerful critique of the socialist belief that we can consciously design a better society from the top down. Hayek's message, shaped by the Great Depression, the rise of totalitarianism, and the Cold War, was clear. Freedom is fragile, and the greatest threat to it is the belief that a few experts know best. So, Did Hayek's ideas ever leave the ivory tower? Absolutely. They had a seismic impact on real-world policy, especially in the late 20th century. Let's look at two major examples. First, Great Britain in the 1970s. The country was struggling with stagflation, a toxic mix of high inflation and stagnant economic growth and crippling labor union strikes. Enter Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. A devoted admirer of Hayek, she explicitly used his ideas as a blueprint for her reforms. Her government focused on controlling the money supply to fight inflation, privatized state-owned industries like British Telecom and British Gas, deregulated financial markets, and took on the power of the unions. These policies, known as Thatcherism, were controversial. They were credited with revitalizing the British economy, but were also blamed for increasing inequality and social division. It was Hayek's theory put into dramatic practice. Across the Atlantic, a similar revolution was underway. President Ronald Reagan's administration in the United States also drew heavily on Hayekian principles. Reaganomics was characterized by significant tax cuts, widespread deregulation, and a strong belief in the power of free enterprise. The goal was to unleash the market from the constraints of government, while Milton Friedman, another free market champion, was also a key influence. The intellectual foundation for Reagan's belief in limited government and self-organizing systems can be traced directly back to Hayek's critique of central planning. Hayek's influence didn't stop there. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, his writings became a guide for many former Soviet bloc countries and nations in Latin America as they transitioned away from state-controlled economies toward more liberal market-based systems. These real-world applications transformed Hayek from an academic theorist into the intellectual architect of a global shift toward free markets. Of course, a thinker as influential as Hayek was bound to have powerful critics. For every supporter who saw him as a prophet of freedom, there was a detractor who saw him as an apologist for inequality. Keynesian economists, for instance, argued that his hands-off approach during economic downturns was cruel. They claimed that waiting for the market to spontaneously correct itself ignored the immense human cost of mass unemployment. Others pointed out that his idea of spontaneous order could sound like a romantic justification for whatever outcome the market produced, glossing over problems like monopolies, environmental pollution, and the concentration of wealth and power. Perhaps the most persistent ethical criticism leveled against Hayek was his association with authoritarian regimes that adopted his economic ideas, most notably Augusto Pinochet's Chile. Critics were horrified that a champion of liberty would seem to endorse market reforms implemented by a military dictatorship. They accused him of a terrible inconsistency. Hayek's defenders argued that he saw a distinction between temporary authoritarianism that was transitioning toward a liberal economy and permanent totalitarianism like that of the Soviet Union. For him, economic freedom was a necessary first step toward political freedom. This debate remains one of the most contentious parts of his legacy. Even his allies didn't always agree with him. Milton Friedman, for example, believed more in managing the money supply through clear rules, while Hayek put more faith in the power of institutions and the price system itself. Despite all this criticism, Hayek's core insights about uncertainty and decentralized knowledge have proven remarkably durable, even influencing fields like complexity theory today. So, what is the ultimate legacy of Friedrich Hayek? It's vast and multifaceted. In 1947, he founded the Mont Pelerin Society, an international gathering of scholars dedicated to defending the principles of a free society at a time when state planning was on the rise globally. This network kept classical liberal ideas alive for decades. His receiving the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1974 marked a major turning point, signaling a revival of market-oriented thinking in a world plagued by the failures of Keynesian policies. His ideas directly inspired not just Thatcher and Reagan, but also a whole generation of economists and reformers who dismantled command economies after the Cold War today. The use of knowledge in society remains a cornerstone of economic education. Hayek's work forces us to confront fundamental questions. How much can we really know? Who should have the power to make decisions for society? And what is the true relationship between economic and personal freedom? While fierce debates over the role of the state and the problem of inequality continue, Hayek's central message remains profoundly relevant. He taught us that knowledge is dispersed. Progress is often an unplanned, evolutionary process, and that human freedom is a precious, fragile thing that must be constantly defended. He passed away in 1992, but his intellectual legacy is woven into the very fabric of our modern discussions about how to build a prosperous and free world. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Friedrich Hayek. If you found this exploration of ideas fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more content that makes you think. We do love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Below, is Hayek a hero of liberty, or did his ideas have a dark side? Let's get the conversation started. Until next time.